welcome back to my channel, Terry Faust Quilts. I'm Terry. In this video, I'm going to share a story with you and talk a little about how I became a quilt designer. And I have a trunk show of some special quilts that I'd like to share as well. I'm not going to be doing any sewing, but I'm just going to be sharing a little more about myself in this video. This is my wall of rollers, all hung up on a pegboard that my husband helped to make for me. And this is what inspires me a lot of times to design a quilt. I love all the possibilities. I love designing with Creative Grids rulers. I love the precision that it helps me to achieve when I'm piecing, ease of cutting a lot of different shapes. So I like to have them all hanging up here on my wall. Most of them are Creative Grids. I have a few others. I do like the So Kind of Wonderful rulers, and I have made a few projects with them. This is my bobbin winder for my long arm. It looks kind of weird, but it's very important. So that's an important part of my quilting. Um, this is the base plate for my long arm. Probably kind of hard to see here, but that's important for long arm quilting. And I keep it hung right here. So I like to just look up here and I think of all the possibilities and what could I make next. I could say that my inspiration to design my own quilt patterns came from this template set right here. This is the Scrap Crazy 8 templates, and that's where it all began for me. So I'm going to tell you a little more about that. I don't know if you can see how wrinkled up and old and worn out looking this plastic packaging is, but it is. And I'm just really happy that I still have the original bag. Isn't that an accomplishment? But the story with the Scrap Crazy template set begins way back when Facebook used to be a lot more fun than it is now. Um, Creative Grids was a business that I followed because I like them a lot. And they were having a contest on Facebook to win a set of these templates. And so probably just had to like it and comment. I don't remember exactly, but I won. And that was just a real thrill for me. So the instructions were that I could go to my nearest quilt shop to pick these up. The designer of these templates is Karen Montgomery, and she, at the time, had a quilt shop not too far, about 40 minutes away in Allison Park, Pennsylvania, called the Quilt Company. And I could go down to her shop and pick up these templates straight from the lady who designed them. So that was really exciting. And I had taken quite a few classes down there, and Karen had taught me a lot about long arming and other things. So I was very excited that I got to win the templates and I got to get them straight from the designer. So that was exciting. One of the things that I like about this template set is that it works perfectly with 10-inch squares or layer cakes, as we like to call them. So I had a pack of layer cakes, squares, and I went straight to work with this template set to learn how to use it. And I tried it out right away. The instructions are very clear on the inside. There are very clear cutting instructions on how to cut your pieces from either a 10-inch square or from yardage. You can cut strips and get the pieces that way. So I went straight to work on that, and I made this quilt behind me, and I loved the fabrics. It just looks like a watercolor palette to me. And when I just made this up, I wasn't sure what to do with them. I just knew I wanted to sew some blocks. So what I decided was I made 4 blocks and pieced them together into one larger block. The template set makes an 8-inch finished square. So these blocks are 16 inches finished. And I just used up all of my layer cake squares and made all of these blocks. And there was just a tiny bit of waste, and it was these little strips here. So probably about 1 1/4 inch strip that came as the leftover waste from cutting my blocks, and I wanted to use that also. So I pieced them into the border, and up in each corner there's a cornerstone that's also one of the 8 inch blocks. So I used my layer cake with just a little bit of fabric for the sashing in the border. And that was my very first quilt with the Scrap Crazy 8 template set. Here is a better shot of that quilt, and you can see the whole thing. I forgot to mention that it was around May 2013 when I won that template set. So that's when my journey began with creating my own quilts. This quilt behind me is the second quilt that I made with the Scrap Crazy 8 template set. This pattern can be found in one of Karen Montgomery's companion books that goes along with the template set, and it's called Hometown, I believe. And this quilt I designed, you'll notice that I shouldn't say I designed it, but the fabric selection that I made with this quilt is the Scrap Crazy blocks here. And I also had a panel that was for, I think, a child's fabric book, and it had all of the characters from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And we just love that. So I found a way to use that in this quilt and alternated the Scrap Crazy block with a piece from the panel. And of course, the most important one is the bumble, and that's my favorite. But this quilt is just lovely. It's our favorite quilt at Christmas. It's going to be on the couch here probably when I take it back to the living room for the next month. You'll notice that the blocks are just set simply with sashing and cornerstones, but the thing that makes it extra special is the border. And the pieced border on this quilt is made with the templates in the set, so that's another fun way to use them. We really love this quilt. From this beloved Christmas quilt, I'm going to walk you over to my long arm machine just a few feet away. And I'd like you to see what I have on the frame right now. This is another hometown quilt that I made because I just really loved that first one so much. I spent some time collecting art gallery fabrics, and there's just something very special about them and the way they feel and the colors. And I wanted to make a special way to showcase those fabrics. And I made another hometown quilt. This has been waiting to be quilted for many years. I loved it, but everything else seemed to be a priority. And now it's getting quilted. And it's going to be a gift for someone special this year. So that's my motivation to get it quilted and finished. But still loving the Scrap Crazy templates and love these colors. Next on my creative journey, I was thinking, what else can I do with this Scrap Crazy block? And I thought to myself, well, I could put some half square triangles around it and it would look like a bear paw. And so that's what I did. These were all scrap fabrics that I had, and I cut them all down to make this quilt. And it's quite big. I documented making this quilt and put it on my blog post. The folks from Cut Loose Press noticed my creation and reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in writing a pattern for them. So I took this quilt and I kind of redesigned it a little bit and created my pattern, the Scrap Crazy Bear Paw. But this is the very first Scrap Crazy Bear Paw. I call her the mama bear because she's so big. I'll give you a better look at the top and bottom borders, but that's one of the things that's special about this quilt is also the templates are used to make a decorative border at the top and the bottom. Here is the top of the quilt. And you'll see that border up there. And then down at the bottom also is the decorative border. I really like that feature. I was pretty proud of myself for doing the math and coming up with that. And so I took this pattern that I created and redesigned it for a cut loose press pattern. So it was the end of 2017 when I began working on my Scrap Crazy Bear Paw pattern. And in February 2018, it was published. It was a really great learning process for me working with Cut Loose Press. They had a lot of um, guidelines that I had to follow. One of them was that you had to have, like, I think it was at least two people do pattern testing for you. And you had to submit proof that those folks pattern tested for you, and they had to write a little report on how everything went and what they thought of the pattern. This particular quilt is the testing pattern that my mom and my Aunt Brenda sewed to help me out with my first pattern. And they created this quilt with a pack of 10-inch squares, a layer cake. So it has four big bear paws, and you can see the top and the bottom have that decorative border, but it's a little smaller than the Big Mama Scrap Crazy Bear Paw. And I will let you see the whole thing here in just a moment. But it was a really good learning experience for me. I realized that there were things that I would like to do differently for myself. And I was also encouraged by some other folks to uh, start writing my own patterns. Eventually, I decided to give that a try. But this was, I was taking a risk doing it, but I didn't have a lot to lose. So it was very fun. I really enjoyed making the pattern. And this is the test pattern. There is the top of the quilt. And you can see down there is the bottom border of the quilt. And it was a challenge for me to design this to use a one layer cake pack and also just a background fabric. This is my Scrap Crazy Bear Paw quilt that I designed, and it's on the pattern cover, the pattern printout that you can get from Cut Loose Press. It is my best-selling pattern of all time. But I just love these fabrics. It was fun to design. It's a very nice size lap throw quilt. It just uses one pack of 10-inch squares plus some background. So it's easy, doesn't require a lot of supplies. It requires the Scrap Crazy template set to make this square and rulers just to square up some half square triangles. So it's not too difficult. I have seen some other people's versions of the Scrap Crazy Bear Paw on Instagram. They were really beautiful. It's really fun to see other people make your pattern and how they envision it with different fabrics. So it's been a lot of fun. Here is a look at the whole quilt with the four big bear paw blocks. There are just a couple other things I'd like to share about this template set and how I've used it, which you might be interested in if you have a quilting group. I quilt with quilters from our church, and we have had our own little quilt show for a few years. And we would also have our sewing machine sitting out so that people who come in for the quilt show would have an opportunity to sew a block with me. And we use the Scrap Crazy 8 templates and cut out pieces from all of the various fabrics that are donated to us. I actually had, for 3 years, we had people come in and sew 8-inch blocks. Now, the great thing about this set is that, okay, they are 8-inch finished, but they're so easy because there are no seams to match up. And if something's a little off, you're never going to know. It's based on a Scrap Crazy quilt. So um, I can honestly tell you that they never came out all the right size, but I was able to trim them all down, sometimes to 8 inches, sometimes to 7.5 inches, depending on um, the different sizes of people's seam allowance. So it might be a nice option for you if you do group projects and everyone is to sew a block or two. And when they all come together, they're not all the same size, but you can trim them down so that they will all fit together. And that is something that we have done multiple times. We've made different charity quilts that we donated using the Scrap Crazy template set. So thanks for joining me and taking time to watch the video. I hope you liked the quilts that you saw. Please come on back. I have another sewing project that I want to share with you soon. Thanks for visiting.